In November 1971, the List family lived in a large Westfield mansion called Breeze Knoll. From the outside, the house still looked orderly. Inside, John List was hiding unemployment, debt, and collapse. He kept leaving home as if he still had a job. The crime that followed was not sudden chaos. It was planned around schedules, school, mail, lights, and time. If you want real crime stories built from records, testimony, and official reports, subscribe and turn on notifications. This case shows how control can hide behind ordinary routines. The first mystery was not who died, it was why no one knew for almost a month. On November 9th, List killed his mother, wife, and 3 children. The facts are severe, so we tell them without graphic detail. Afterward, he arranged the home to delay discovery. Music played, lights stayed on, and ordinary routines were imitated from the outside. Notes were sent to explain absences. The family's silence was turned into a planned disappearance. Deliveries were stopped. Each small administrative act bought more time. Neighbors saw lights burning day and night. At first that looked strange. Then it looked impossible. On December 7th, police entered the house and discovered the truth hidden behind weeks of silence. The delay was part of the crime. Time was the first disguise. A family car was found near an airport, a clue that suggested escape without proving where he had gone. List had removed himself from family photographs, making it harder to show the public the face they needed to find. A manhunt began, but he had planned for distance, identity, and time. He became Robert Peter Clark. Under that name, he built another life while his real name faded into a cold case. Years turned into more than a decade. The case remained open, but the trail had gone quiet. John List did not vanish by magic. He vanished through planning and an ordinary alias. At trial, financial pressure became part of the explanation. But explanation is not excuse. List also claimed religious motives, saying he believed he was saving souls. The court did not accept that as accountability. Helen, Alma, Patricia, Frederick, and John Frederick were not props in his story. They were the people he erased. The mansion itself became infamous, then was later destroyed by fire, adding another layer to the case's strange afterlife. By the late 1980s, the case needed a new way to show an old face. Forensic artist Frank Bender created an age-progressed bust, imagining what List might look like after 17 years. America's Most Wanted aired the case in 1989. Television gave the fugitive a new face. The capture came from a viewer, a memory, and a sculpted face. A former neighbor recognized the resemblance and contacted authorities. The cold case suddenly had heat. List was arrested at an accounting office in Richmond, Virginia, still living under his assumed name. Even after arrest, he initially held on to the alias, but fingerprints and records pulled the old identity back into view. He was returned to New Jersey, where the case that began in 1971 finally moved toward trial. In court, the long disappearance did not soften the facts. It made them harder to ignore. In 1990, John List was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder. He received 5 consecutive life sentences, making parole effectively impossible. The sentencing judge emphasized the voices of the victims, not the explanations of the man who killed them. The case fascinated the public because of the mansion, the alias, and the capture, but the center remains the family. The trial ended the fugitive story. It did not end the grief. Under the name Bob Clark, List had worked, remarried, and moved through ordinary spaces unnoticed. His cover was not glamorous. It was paperwork, church, employment, and a quiet refusal to reveal the past. The age-progressed bust became a landmark example of forensic art helping public recognition. Media helped catch him, but retelling the case requires care. A family's destruction should not become entertainment without context. List's hidden unemployment shows how shame can become dangerous when mixed with control and isolation. His religious explanation was a distortion of faith into permission. The legal record treated it as motive, not justification. Weeks before discovery deepened the horror because the house looked inhabited while the truth was sealed inside. Westfield was left with a crime that seemed incompatible with the neighborhood's self-image. Investigators had to work from a staged house, missing photographs, and a suspect already gone. The airport clue widened possibilities. It suggested travel but did not show a destination. For almost 18 years, the case lived in files and memory until television changed its reach. The impossible part was not escape. It was how ordinary the escape looked. America's Most Wanted did not solve the case alone. It connected a reconstructed face with a viewer who remembered. Recognition is fragile. One person saw enough similarity to make the call that ended the fugitive life. Fingerprints confirmed what the alias denied. Robert Clark was John List. At trial, List described pressures and beliefs. The prosecution kept returning to planning and intent. Victims' names matter because the killer's name has taken too much space in the story. Breeze Knoll became a symbol. But symbols can distract. The crime was against people, not architecture. The case shows how public attention can revive a file when traditional leads have failed. The bust worked because it was not a photograph. It was a careful prediction of time on a face. List remained imprisoned until his death in 2008. The fugitive years were long. The accountability, when it came, was permanent. The case influenced books, shows, and fictional stories. But fiction should not replace the record. The real timeline rests on court records, reporting, and the documented capture after the broadcast. The story is not about a mastermind. It is about control, cowardice, and the lives destroyed by both. Small documents mattered: notes, bank records, identity papers, and the absence of photographs. The deception worked because it copied ordinary life closely enough for people to hesitate. The family's relative privacy gave List more room to stage disappearance after death. When neighbors finally called, the house had already been silent for weeks. John List tried to remove himself from the picture. The record put him back in it. This case remains disturbing because it joins domestic murder, long escape, and the power of one viewer recognizing a face. By the time police entered Breeze Knoll, the clues did not point to panic. They pointed to a timeline arranged by someone trying to buy distance. List left written explanations behind. They were not confessions of remorse so much as a controlled attempt to explain the unexplainable. The financial collapse mattered because it showed how long the performance had been going on before the murders. The most chilling part of the record is how List tried to wrap murder in religious language, turning control into a false moral argument. Strongest records come from court files, police accounts, archived reporting, and later interviews about the capture. Breeze Knoll became a symbol because the house looked preserved while the truth inside had been hidden for weeks. After the murders, List did not vanish into chaos. He built a quieter life under another name and waited for the old face to disappear. The paper trail was thin but important. Aliases, work history, church connections, and small details that later helped investigators. The bust on national television mattered because it translated an old photograph into a face someone might recognize decades later. The break came from recognition. A viewer saw the reconstruction and connected it to a man living under a different name. The arrest ended the escape, but it also reopened the story for a public that had almost turned it into a legend. At trial, the prosecution had to connect the old house, the letters, the victims, and the hidden years into one chain. The sentence did not restore what was lost. It only marked the point where the escape finally stopped. This episode should keep the focus on the documented record, the family, the delay, the fugitive years, and the capture. The case became famous partly because television solved what years of quiet searching had not. The victims are often reduced to the killer's name. A careful retelling has to keep the family visible in the story. Breeze Knoll later burned, but the case stayed in public memory because the delay and escape were so calculated. Sources and chapter notes belong in the description so viewers can separate the record from the legend. If this real case stayed with you, hit like, subscribe to Frond, and follow for more source-backed crime documentaries.